So I've hit record. Now we are live. Now I am with Dr. Allan Bacon, a name I could never forget because obviously it's Bacon and your doc. But no, I'm happy you are able to come on here. You are officially going to be the first guest on this podcast. When this airs, it'll probably be in 2 weeks' time. So I'm honored to have you here. Now, before we jump into everything we want to talk about, tell me a little bit more about you, about your story. Let the people know who Dr. Allan Bacon is.
Thanks, John. I appreciate you having me on the podcast. It is an honor to be the first guest. Hopefully I do it justice. A little bit about myself. Over the years, it's almost like I have a little bit of ADD in what I like to do. I earned a dental surgical degree, a doctorate from University of Maryland, and I practiced for 10 years. And all throughout that time, I had my foot in the fitness industry. I was professionally formulating for a bunch of companies. I was training folks on the side. And through different life circumstances, my father ended up getting a terminal form of cancer. And I remember having a distinct conversation with him at one point. And he had been a dentist for 35 years. And I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of guys in the medical industry, a lot of guys and girls in the medical industry have kind of a compromised quality of life. For me, I had 9 days off a year. And that included sick days. So when I would want to go on vacation, I'd get a week, and then we would get some longer weekends throughout the year. And my dad had said that one of the big things that he had wished he would have done is had more time to spend with family, to spend with friends. And I kind of took that to heart. And at the time, we were doing well enough monetarily to be able to strap things down and kind of take that leap. So after talking it over with my wife, we started Maui Athletics, which is a fitness and nutrition coaching company, and been doing that ever since. I mean, that was something that in the first year we're like, oh, this is doing pretty well. And I had kept my practicing at the time. And then by the second year, it was becoming really time intensive. And I think you kind of understand this. Anybody that creates their own content, anybody that really wants to better their own practice. I mean, a lot of guys like, you and me, we spend a lot of time reading and teaching ourselves because we always want to be better. And so I kind of felt like it was holding me a little bit back in the fitness and nutrition side. So I retired from that and went into Maui Athletics full time. And it's been a ride ever since.
I appreciate you sharing that with me, man. I had no idea that you were a dentist for so long.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm sorry to hear about your father. Obviously, that's tough to bring up. I'm sure. Like it's tough to talk about.
It is, but it's one of those things that I think that a lot of people find it difficult to put these types of things in perspective. And I certainly did too. And until I had that conversation with him, I had never really considered, you put so much time into certain things, you invest 6-8 years after college to, get these degrees, to get your training, to get all these things down. And then, if you consider, well, how about taking this drastic life turn? And I think a lot of people consider doing that in one way or another. And I think that for me, it kind of took that step back moment in his situation to be able to accept it and say, this is something that I really like to do. So it's tough to talk about, but it is something that kind of pushes you towards doing something you wouldn't have done otherwise. So in a way, I was thankful for that insight from him because he was the one that made even this podcast possible.
Fair point. Yeah.
So sometimes you find these things turn out, for some positivity when you wouldn't have expected it.
Yeah, it was kind of almost like a push that you may or may not have known you needed at the time, because you're kind of at your feet in both kind of camps.
Absolutely. And I think that people find that in a lot of ways in life. And, to bring things back to the topics that we generally cover, you'll find a lot of people, a lot of clients, a lot of people that are trying to change their lives that they don't fully commit to that. They're interested in it, but they don't fully commit to that until they potentially have a life-changing situation. Maybe you're diagnosed with diabetes. Maybe you saw somebody in your family get really sick from a sedentary lifestyle. You can take that negative energy and turn it around and make it something positive, even if on the surface it's not a great thing. And certainly having health consequences, health problems is not a great thing. But if you can learn from somebody else, maybe you can better yourself. Maybe you can teach somebody else later in life and prevent them from having the problems.
That couldn't be more true in 2020, I'd say, with what's going on right now. Yeah, most definitely. And I think like that pushed me to want to help people as well. Like I went through my own kind of transformation, and my brother went through a massive one as well that I was a part of. And it's just like, it's almost eye-opening, because if you go from one state, it's very negative, flip the script, and all of a sudden you unknowingly maybe become this like inspiration for other people. And I always kind of liked working out. I mean, I was a hockey player growing up, so that was not new to me, but learning like the nitty gritty and like the nutrition side of things was completely new, because back when I was like playing hockey, and people that taught me was like, okay, pasta dinners like 4 hours before the game, and like just the old bro science type of meal plan for hockey players. That's the extent of the nutrition I knew. But I think it's unfortunate too sometimes for people that we're trying to help, potential clients, stuff like that, that it takes such a negative sometimes to get them to move towards the positive. Whereas in an ideal space, it's like, here's everything we're teaching you, take it and use it. Like, don't wait for something terrible to potentially happen to be inspired to make that change.
Well, I think that's the thing with coaches, right? Is a lot of times, and this is something that coaches need to keep in mind. A lot of times we come from this situation where maybe we had that realization moment, and we almost forget sometimes that not all people have had that. So we're like, why don't, in the back of our mind, they're like, I'm not losing weight. And we're like, well, we've talked about moderating off-plan choices. And even with your logo, you're kind of the proponent of the flexible eating, and so am I. But I'm a proponent of flexible eating that is conscious of the individual's emotional, and mental state. And for some people, having a donut and getting back on track is the right move. For some people, avoiding the donut is the right move. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to avoid it for the rest of your life. But maybe it's the right move right now. And I think that when we have those conversations with people, and I think a lot of coaches, like I was saying, kind of get a little forgetful about the part of the journey that their client might be on. It can be a little bit difficult when you haven't had that realization to fully grasp what someone's saying. So when you're like, well, just have a donut and then, don't stress over it, get back on track. Well, a lot of people are going to stress over that majorly, because they feel like a failure. Whereas you have had enough experience to know, and I mean, I've seen some of the changes that you've put into your own body. You've had enough experience to know that, hey, that time that I had that donut, I learned that if I just got back on track and I'm good, 80, 90% of the time, good, 80 and 90% of the time, that other percentage is not a make or break for me. And everybody says it's not one meal that's going to make you fat. It's not one meal that's going to make you thin, but there's still that mental hurdle that people need to get over.
Yeah.
And it is one of those things that you need to come to that decision yourself. So it's a difficult hurdle to meet, but I think, like you were saying, sometimes it takes those experiences to be able to put things in perspective. And I think as coaches, we just need to be a little bit conscious of the fact that maybe they haven't reached that moment yet. So just being patient, consistently pushing that forward, is the right way to go.
And I mean, as coaches, we have to educate. Like, that's what I make sure to tell everyone. And I'm sure as hell you tell everyone you're working with, or the first call you guys have, is that this is an education process as much as it is like a guidance and support thing, because we could all give everyone else meal plans and just send them on their way, but that's not coaching, right? And I think
100%.
too, with like the donut thing, I mean, that was never really the plan, but once I was given it, I was like, this is amazing. But the thing with that and with posts and even coaches like ourselves, we typically post with context. And I think that's kind of where the missing link happens is some coaches will just post about, yeah, just get back on track, just get back on track. Whereas I like to explain the mindset behind what get back on track is, or what led to the donut, or just get more information out of someone or give them more background instead of just saying, I had 6 donuts, but I got back on track, I'm good. Like, that's not helpful for anyone. It's more of like, okay, what did I actually do? Why did I want the donuts? And I think, like you said, the mental hurdle is huge. That's got to be, as much as we're helping people train better, eat better, it's a mental game.
It's absolutely a mental game. And I think that your mentioning of education is what really is the difference between a trainer and a coach. I think that for the majority of people, I mean, the internet comes with a lot of pluses. One of the things that you can do is you can look up enough information to figure out your own macros. I mean, there's certainly enough macro calculators out there. You can look up enough information to figure out an exercise routine to do. But that's not why you hire a coach. You hire a coach because they can kind of cut through the BS. They can help figure out what you want to do or what you're really trying to say when you're trying to explain your mental thought processes when you're doing things. And they help cut out the doubt. And I think that that's a big thing that coaches can provide that a lot of people are missing when they're trying to do their own programming themselves. Because you can look up, like I said, you can look up pretty much anything that you want to online. But once you get 2-3 months in, especially if you're in a building phase where you don't see those results happening super quickly, everybody starts to second guess themselves.
Yep.
So that's where the good coaching comes into play. You're all right. You know, we've got these objective measures. We're seeing you move in the right direction. Keep going. So I think that your thought process of coaches bringing some of those more intangible benefits to the table is exactly what makes a coach a coach.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah. And I think it's funny that you brought up building phases, because I've had conversations with people, for lack of a better term, to talk them off the ledge when they're really struggling with something in terms of lack of progress or seeming lack of progress. And the people I have in the building phase right now, they have the harder time, but I made sure I tell them beforehand, like, look, you've went through a cut already. You saw the scale go down. You lost the inches. You saw it. This phase will not look like that. You will not see week to week progress the same you saw. We have different measures to look for to make sure you're making progress. It's no longer this visual game. And building phase or fat loss phase, I think most people, whether they're uneducated in the topic or just don't know how to approach it, or they just don't want to approach it because they have so many other priorities in life, is they don't know to look other than the scale in the mirror, because there really are so many other things that are important for quality of life, as you mentioned earlier, other than what that number on the scale is or what the mirror looks like. Yes, the mirror will change, but if you stare at yourself every single day, take no pictures, no measurements, and don't record any other biofeedback, you're not going to see a damn thing. And I make sure to tell everybody that as well, because we are our own toughest critics. I haven't met, I think, a single person who isn't harder on themselves than they need to be, which can be a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, I think that people are very hard on themselves, and I think that the building phase is by far harder for people, and I think that it's the thing that gets at least most guys. It's the thing that keeps most guys from reaching their goal, the goal that they have in their mind when they start. And it's okay to change that goal along the way, because sometimes you get into things and you realize, I don't want to do what it takes to get to this goal. And so then you reassess and you go to where you're comfortable. But I think that the building phase is much, much harder emotionally. You know, unlike what you were hinting at with cutting, where you are seeing progressive changes, you know, literally every 2-3 weeks. You know, you can see, you know, objective, hey, I lost this many pounds, or hey, my measurements dropped. I think for coaches, the building phase is the toughest phase to coach somebody through. Because I find that people can generally handle it for 2 to 3 months pretty well. And then fatigue sets in, fatigue of, well, when is this going to be over? When am I going to see these really good results? When am I going to, not feel like I'm nauseous every time that I eat? And that is a thing that happens. And I'm not saying it happens to everybody, but especially for skinnier guys, you're trying to change something that is different than what your body wants to be. And, if you're force feeding yourself, which is essentially what a building phase is, you're going to feel a little bit sick.
Yeah.
And so pushing people through those hurdles is really difficult. At least with cutting, you just have less work. I just cook less, and you still deal with issues. You still deal with cravings. You still deal with, for obese people, you still deal with changing up a lifestyle than what you're used to. But at least it's a lot faster to see those results that people really want to see. They can see the mirror changing. They can see the scale changing. So I think what you were talking about of finding some other outlets to look at that might show signs of success is really the way to get through that. Alongside what you were saying with setting up proper expectations to begin with. So if you have somebody that wants to get into this, I always tell people, look, we are no longer, you have a physique goal, but we're no longer going to be looking at your physique. And that is the worst thing to tell somebody, is that what you want is going to get worse before it gets better. And so what we do is I like to, and you can comment on that if you want to change to argue that. But what I usually tell people is, what we're going to do is we're going to switch focus from your end goal is physique. But what we're going to do is we're going to switch focus from physique, and we're going to look at performance. Because one of the things that you can watch move relatively quickly in a building phase is how are my lifts going? Am I feeling healthier? Am I feeling more energetic? Am I getting stronger? For guys, I love the tank top, because you can start to feel your shoulders and your arms getting bigger, or how your arms fit in a t-shirt. But these are things that people don't really tend to focus on until you point them out and kind of start pushing them towards that. But that's the way that you make a build sustainable. Yeah.
Well, I think the population of people who want to build and understand what a building phase is minimal. I mean, the majority of people want fat loss, and maybe people don't know what a building phase is. They just think, oh, I'm going to eat more and I'm going to build muscle.
I think the majority of people that want to build is extremely minimal. I think that the people that actually want the results of the build is actually much higher than what you would think.
Yeah.
Because, and this might be my experience, but in my experience, more than 50% of guys that come to me say that they want to lose fat and want to build muscle, which is technically possible when it's technically possible for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, if this isn't your first year of lifting, or you aren't, significantly obese, doing them both at the same time is very slow. And most people aren't going to have 3 or 4 years of patience to stick to a routine that way.
Yeah.
So the real answer for them is go into a build first, most likely, unless they've got significant body fat to lose.
Yeah.
Go into a build first of some kind and then cut later. And that is one of the hardest things, because it is really delaying that self-satisfaction of seeing yourself immediately
seeing that cut
towards your goal.
Yeah.
Towards seeing that cut.
I think that's it. A lot of women as well, like whether they know it or not, they need to build muscle. I think that has been a difficult conversation for a lot of coaches as well, especially with the explosion of, like, I'll call them real coaches on Instagram, real female coaches, not fitfluencers, none of that bullshit. Women who have muscle definition, and then the everyday population who aspires to look like them. I don't know. I think there's a disconnect there between, they don't know that they've taken all these years to build muscle. Those women don't just cut and they look like that, because you have to have a certain amount of muscle mass to look that way. So the amount of women I've worked with as well that they want to look a certain way, I'm like, okay, it's going to take, like, we have phases to work through here, because if you want a certain body composition, we're not necessarily going to be do it all at once, right? It's very rare that that'll happen. So you have to take them through whatever they see themselves as first, I'd say, depending on how much body fat they're carrying and that sort of thing.
Well, I find that too. And in some instances, so a lot of times in my mind, I'll think, The best way to do this is to go into a build first, because essentially what we're going to do is we're going to add that muscle, and then later as they cut down, they're going to start to display that muscle more and be happier with their results. But you have to take that emotional aspect into play too. And so for some people, what I'll do is I'll say, this is what I recommend, as optimal. However, from what you're telling me, it almost sounds like you want to lose a little bit of fat first and then consider going into that. And if that's what it takes to give someone that internal motivation to know that the process is working, that's what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And I know that that's like, for a lot of coaches, it's almost grading on a chalkboard, because you're like, oh, I could take them there so much faster doing it this way. But you're not doing it for you, you're doing it for them.
Exactly.
And so you do what needs to be done, to help get them to their goal as painlessly as possible for them. And this kind of goes back to the whole, I could give you a plan that's 100% optimal on paper, but if you're not willing to do it, it's worth nothing. So I can give you a plan that's 80% optimal on paper. And if you'll do it 100%, that's your plan.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that is something that is really important, that more experienced coaches start to realize. I mean, when you first started, I know when I first started, and I was doing this on the side and not professionally, friends would ask, how can I do this? And I would be like, this is how you do it. And they'd be like, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, but that's how you do it. and so that becomes, and that's something that you realize is probably the wrong answer for a lot of people. And you start to learn to finesse your technique a little bit more, because every person's different. And, not every person is you. Not every person is going to have the mindset that you have. Not every person is going to respond the way that you do. And some people will have different goals and different ways they want to get there. And so setting out the right expectations and then carrying that forward is where we should be going.
Yeah. It's meeting them where, I don't want to say halfway, 'cause it's not really halfway, but it's seeing where they want to go, but also helping them get there, instead of just being like, this is the way I operate, this is the way you're going to do things, or else it's not going to work. And I think that's where a lot of rookie coaches probably made that mistake. I have, hands down, I've made that mistake. It's like, this is the way we're doing it, not really helping them with what adheres to them better, right? If the plan is 20% less optimal, but 100% better for them. But I think a lot of the times I've seen online too is coaches will be like, oh yeah, like to be proud of like firing clients. And I'm like, why? I don't understand. You're in the business of helping people. Like, what the hell's going on here?
I still take that so hard. I mean, luckily for us, we have a strong roster. We've got enough people that in theory we could do that. But I feel myself like I failed somebody if that ends up being the case. Now, there are certain people that you work with and they never get the right expectations, or they never get the right mindset, or they don't really want what they say that they want. They don't want to do what it requires to get to what they say that they want. But I don't think that there's anything that I lose sleep over more than considering doing that with somebody and being we just don't fit.
Yeah, it's not. I don't see that as a proud moment. Is like clients telling me they're leaving because they're happy they can do it for themselves. Yeah, like
I've graduated.
That's the best.
Yeah,
I don't look to fire people because they're not following protocol. It's like sometimes if you exhaust everything you exhaust and they're not there, then maybe it's time to have a call and be like, look, what's really going on? But I'm not going to go flaunting, oh yeah, like I just kicked 5 people off my roster. I'm like, that's weird. I don't get that.
It is. Luckily good coaches don't have a whole lot of that going on. So that's a good plus.
I think we have better things to do than fish on the internet for that stuff.
Absolutely.
That's funny. Speaking of the internet, because I do have to talk about it. So first of all, your meme game is hella strong.
I know. That's one of my strengths.
I need to know how and why the meme group became what it is now, and where all these memes come from. Because
my God,
but I don't know if you create them all. I don't know.
Oh no, I don't create any of them. I'm not going to take any credit for any of that. When I used to not have groups, I used to post all of these on my wall, and everybody used to get a big kick out of it. And so a lot of the times I was finding that I was using some of the fitness memes to either bring up an idea, not necessarily because I agreed with it, but just because I wanted to talk about it. Which is why you see so many sumo deadlifting jokes.
Triggered.
Yeah. So I either bring it up because I want to talk about it, or because it actually is a good lesson to learn. And so I found that when I was talking to a lot of people, if I could make it a little bit more entertaining in that way for them, that people would be more receptive and more willing to learn a few things. So with the meme group that I run, people have a lot of fun. We get to joke around. We get to talk about a lot of stuff. But we also get a lot of good information being pushed around as well. And I think it makes the information a little bit more palatable than having to just read study after study after study, which I can certainly do for people. Yeah. If they want to do that, but I don't think that the majority of people want that. So I think that moving into a realm of being informational, but having that just humorous type of angle to it can help people learn. And I think that a lot of people have done this extremely well. I think Spencer Nadolski does it really well. Yeah. I think Jordan Syatt doesn't use memes, but he does really well. I mean, one of his strongest abilities is his entertainment ability.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of guys who have some good information have kind of gone this route. And I think it works really well. And I think it's what people want to see anyways.
Well, it's fun, and it makes fitness fun. Like, I've been in a few fitness groups and I have my own, and sometimes the posts that I expect to do well are crickets. And sometimes the posts that are like a joke about fitness, like I think I made a post about protein shakes and beer and how they should always be cold, and that like blew up. And I'm like, this took me
you're like, I didn't put any effort into this one.
3 minutes to make it one picture with a title. I'm like, I wrote a whole post for you guys and did nothing. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, if the audience, I mean, in the days we're in right now, it's quick, right? Everyone wants something quick. And if you're scrolling through memes and they're all catching you, one of them will stick, at least, you'd think, right? Where that person will want to learn more about that topic, and that's where your information comes in.
Well, I also think too, it's kind of like people will learn things that they didn't even know that they wanted to learn. Sure. by having so many of these floating around. I mean, there are a lot of guys that make these things now. And having so many of them floating around, it kind of brings up topics. Some people, I had somebody the other day say in my group, I'm a new trainer, and, I really enjoy learning in here. And I was like, well, feel free to ask any questions that you want. I'll address anything that you have, because anytime questions go through, I address those too. And he was like, I don't even know what questions to ask. And so by him being in there, he said that he's picking up a lot, because he didn't even know that these things were problems, and where, other people are asking questions, he's getting questions answered that he didn't even know he had. And I think that this is one of those big benefits. Facebook groups are my favorite way to interact with people. And they're my favorite way to interact with people, because you get so many people that are actually talking back and forth. So you get actual, thoughts back and forth. Whereas on things like Instagram or Twitter, you don't really have conversations. You kind of get bludgeoned with information, and then that's it. You either hit like or you don't, and you move on. Whereas Facebook groups can be good things, because you can get a lot of back and forth. And this is just one more way to be able to engage a larger group of people and make a difference with a larger group of people. So I think you should definitely take advantage of it. And having your own group is an awesome start to that.
Absolutely. And you can moderate the content.
You can moderate the content too. So you clearly see that I do that a lot. And so when things get off track, the good thing is I can stop bad information from getting out there too.
Extremely important.
Which is extremely helpful. But what you were saying earlier, you will always find, you're going to go and you're going to spend all this time, looking up research citations, finding the right information for people, and writing up this incredible 4 or 5 paragraph explanation for this thing, and you'll get your 7 pity likes, and it's always from the same 7 people, which we love because they're the great people.
Yeah.
And then you come out with something that's just, your normal sense of humor on an observation that took you 30 seconds because it just came to you, and everyone's like, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
So having those groups is not a bad thing because you've got an outlet for both of those.
It's true. And I like that you bring up that you can have full on conversations pretty much in a group. It's all there. The threads are there. Whereas on a normal Facebook timeline, you got to scroll through a lot of crap just to get to the good stuff.
The real benefit to the groups is it is far less likely to be like someone's Facebook wall, which is just political arguing.
Yeah.
So at least in the group, you can kind of control that. I mean, sometimes that comes up, but you can mostly control that and stay on target. So I have not found a social media outlet that I like more than Facebook groups, specifically for what they bring to the table. Mm-hmm. Now, it might be because of my coaching style or the way that, I like to interact with people. There are definitely a ton of guys that do extremely well on YouTube, that do extremely well on Instagram. But this one just kind of was in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Like community building.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, you spend more time conversing with people rather than like the guys who kill it on YouTube will spend way more time content creating, possibly editing if they don't have someone doing that for them. So like you're busy, you're running your own business, like you have clients, where is your time spent? And I think if Facebook groups just kind of fell into your lap in that sense and you took and ran with it, and obviously it's doing well for you.
Yeah. So it's something that I'm loving. And I highly recommend that coaches look towards that if they want to be able to hold conversations with their clients.
Definitely. Yeah. What it's hard, I guess it's hard to say what your best meme was, but like, what's the subject that always like gets the most kind of talking on it?
Oh my God. It's easily BCAAs.
Really?
I don't know if that's, but I don't know if that's good talking because it's generally not. So the most comments that I ever get is when we start joking around about BCAAs. And I don't know what it is about BCAAs that does this, but it is the most polarizing subject that I've ever seen for some reason. And it always goes back to the fact that there's a lot of research out about it, and there are a lot of people pushing it. Pretty much every professional pushes it because they get paid to push it. And then you can look up research, and you can certainly find stuff that seems very convincing that it's extremely beneficial. And in certain situations, they can be. But once you start to look at why it might not be beneficial, you start to realize, 99% of people are in the situation where it's probably not beneficial. Why am I trying to pigeonhole myself into that 1% that it is? And I have no idea why, but that becomes the most hot button topic.
That's so funny.
That and arching your back on bench press.
Really?
Becomes the most hot button topics that you could possibly post online.
I know I think there's Instagram accounts dedicated to like women dispelling the arch myth to like haters and trolls online, like the powerlifting women, because women typically have bigger arches than men.
Ooh, yeah, they're much more flexible.
Yeah.
For some reason, our spines don't do that.
I have no arch.
I think that, I don't know, there's there's the large group of people that feels that it's cheating. But it is fair within a set of rules. It does lower your range of motion. So maybe it's, depending on how significant your arch is, it might not be the best move if you are focusing on hypertrophy.
Oh yeah.
But I think that the biggest thing is that most people don't realize that even professional bodybuilders that dumbbell bench and barbell bench, you actually have a small arch. Nobody has a flat back. There's no person's spine is built like a pencil. And so if it was, we would have a very hard time maintaining balance well. But we do have that arch in a regular bodybuilder bench. And I think that these guys that get really upset about it have made fun of it for so long that they're not willing to accept that they do that.
Sounds like it. Yeah. People just and I don't understand why they care so much. That's my thing. I'm like, who cares? They're in a sport. that's the rules. They're within the rules of the sport. Just let them be. Just focus on your own bench.
It's I mean, people like to feel like they're in groups, I think. And
Yeah.
so they like to, their bros have said this, and it's something that they've been really excited about in the past, and it got them acceptance. And then you say it again and you're not in that same group, and everyone else is like, dude, it doesn't matter. But you double down on it because it's something that you've been saying for so long.
Yeah, you become so attached to it.
I don't know why these things get so much heat, but those are the two of the biggest ones that I've seen.
So fun. The BCA one is funny to me because like it's a lot of the top people in the industry have come out and said, look, like you said, most people do not need them, but it's like, I don't know if it's because people love product and they want to feel like they're doing something within their workout. Cause like, oh, like I'm doing this drink during my workout. So like my workout's intense and it's helping me.
Yeah.
It's gotta be just all up in our heads. Like
it's mostly placebo. It's mostly placebo in the fact that some of them taste good.
Oh yeah, BCAAs have the best flavors for sure. So I drink a protein powder when you could drink a fruity BCA drink.
Right. It tastes much better than protein. So I think that a lot of people are, if they can find any bit of information that could suggest to them that it's beneficial for them, they're like, yeah, that sounds right. Because then I can justify continuing to buy it and continuing to do it. But I mean, you've seen that conversation that I've had with people. And every time somebody brings that up, I'm like, just buy, Mio or another water enhancer, because they use the same flavor profiles that the BCAAs do.
Yeah.
But you pay a tenth of the price.
Yeah. That's something I do not miss, is paying like $90 a tub of, what was the BCAA? What was the company that Lane used to work for?
Extend. It's Civation.
Yeah, I used to take Extend back in the day. I was a BCA bro too.
Lane's research is what really made that blow up. And that's not a hit on Lane. What was happening at the time was we had a very small body of knowledge, and with the way that the studies were set up, they just didn't pick up where it would have fallen off. And not been beneficial. And so a lot of them, the two that really stand out to me was, in the 90s, they did this study. This wasn't Lane, but they did this study where they took these competitive wrestlers, high school wrestlers, and these guys were getting like 60 grams of protein a day or something like that. And they gave them like 70 grams of BCAAs, and it gave them benefits. Yeah. Because they were really underfed. And then the other one that really kind of sparked this was, there was a study in a murine model study in rats. And what they did was they took these rats and they essentially starved them, and then they gave them some BCAAs, and they found that they could tread water longer if they gave them some BCAAs. Wow. Well, yeah, because it has calories. And so that's another thing that like people don't realize, that they have calories, because legally they don't have to list them as having calories.
Yeah.
So if you start off with these two studies that are showing, increased muscle mass, increased performance, and then you run studies in isolation, which is unfortunately what happened for a few years, without controlling for protein, without controlling for diet, you kept seeing positive study after positive study. And so even back then, I was in the mindset of, this was late 90s, early 2000s. I was in the mindset of, yeah, let's take BCAAs. And I recommended it to people.
Yeah.
And again, this is where you get into a pitfall with the BCAA crew, because they say, well, at one point you recommended them and then you changed your mind. So why can't you change your mind again? And the thing about following along with research is, as new stuff comes out, you go from having a little flashlight looking at a subject to having a giant floodlight, the more and more information comes out. And so you might find that you change your initial recommendation because something else, hey, I now realize why that was doing what it was doing. We were wrong. I'm sorry. Could there be a point in the future where I drastically change on this topic? Probably not. There's a lot of information out now. There wasn't a lot of information. There would be a lot. Probably not. Now, is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. If we find that, there's a certain dosing protocol that we haven't tested yet, and if you take it at this time and this amount, even though you're having this much protein, and maybe there's something that, like for keto, because they don't have the same kind of anabolic response from lacking carbs, maybe there is a reason to push the MPS with some leucine or something, like maybe there's something,
Yeah.
Then yes, we can incorporate that. But it's going to take a lot of information to make us want to change at this point.
Well, the people that are whatever camp people are in, we're talking about BCAs, they're appealing to some sort of authority in the first place as to why they're taking the BCAs, but then they're just completely disregarding any new evidence that comes in afterwards because they're stuck in that camp. So if they were telling you to flip-flop if new information came, but they're not willing to change their stance, like it's kind of catch-22 for you. Like you don't win.
Yeah, but you're the one that reads the research, so you kind of have to be the adult about it.
Well, yeah,
because clearly they're not reading what you just shared with them.
No.
And if they're not reading what you just shared with them, the only thing that you can really do is to say, this is why what you have been shown. This is why what you have been shown is showing the results that it is. Can you find something? I can show you that when that's controlled for, this shows the opposite. Can you find something that would show that what I'm saying is wrong? And so usually what they'll do is they'll get a guy who has a doctor's title and owns a company that sells BCAs. And
nice.
They'll be like, well, he says that this is, and you're like, okay, what studies did he use?
Because they're not invested in that at all.
Right. And so people don't want to, it's cognitive dissonance. You have learned a certain way and you don't like learning that you're wrong. And I guarantee you that we all do it. I mean, you do it, I do it, but hopefully what we do is a lot less protracted than some other people. Hopefully we learn quicker.
Well, that's the thing. Well, as coaches, I think we have to admit when we are wrong because we're not right all the time. And I'm not afraid to say to clients, I don't know, but I will find out for you. Like I think that's where people have a problem is a lot of new coaches and maybe old ones, they feel like they have to know everything. So if they don't, they'll just kind of make it up on the spot and hope people catch on. But then that's how more misinformation spreads.
Right. This is what's really funny is the topics that we're covering in this podcast are actually really good for coaches. This is like this is what you experience as you go from point A to as you start to become more experienced. Look out for these pitfalls. I kind of like where we're going with some of these topics because it can be very beneficial for those people. This is what guys who have been in the industry for years have experienced. Don't make the mistakes that we did. I mean, I think that, and this was the same thing when I was in medical. I highly respected doctors that would say, you know what, I'm referring you out because I know that this isn't in my wheelhouse. I know that I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to this, but they are conscious enough to know where their limits are. And I think I kind of exemplified it when I was talking about, not exemplified. I think I kind of pointed out that I have a couple different hats that I wear, with supplements and a certified nutritionist and fitness and stuff like that. But I'll be the first person to tell you, and you'll see consistently in my groups that when somebody asks for rehab advice, I'm like, nope, we're stepping away from that. That's, go see a physiotherapist. I don't know what I'm talking about. I know the basis, and I probably know enough to say something to some of these people, but I'm not confident enough that it would be the right answer given their specific circumstances. And that's just one of the areas that I know that it's better for me to tell you to go to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of coaches, this goes back to us having our coaches podcast.
Yeah.
I think a lot of coaches, when you first start out, you're going to feel like you have to answer every question. And I don't think that that's an unnatural response. I think that's something that everybody goes through. But what you said is the exact way that you should put it. I don't know the answer to that. I will find out for you. Or I don't know the answer to that, but I know who can help you. One of those two answers is the right way to respond to things that you don't really know. There's nothing wrong with saying, I need to take a little time. I need to look into this because I want to make sure that I'm getting you the exact right information. Or I need to get you to this guy because I'm so far off base that I don't even want to comment on this topic.
Yeah.
And I think that younger coaches and newer coaches feel that you should know everything that you need to know after your cert. And there's not a single cert that technically prepares you adequately for the real world. Yeah. And that's not to scare people, but what that is to say is find somebody that, if you're a new coach and get hired at LA Fitness, or you are friends with guys online or something like that, find a coach, ask them if you can bounce questions off them, because you're going to need them. You need to generally find a mentor of some kind. It can help a ton with getting through those first few years.
Yeah. That's something I wish I had back when I started. Is I kind of just dove into it solo, and I'm like, no, I'm going to figure this out by myself. Highly regret. I was arrogant and just, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what it was.
I don't know if it's so much arrogant as maybe you didn't have the options, or maybe someone didn't explicitly tell you, hey, find somebody. First off, the more experienced coaches, the guys that have been in it for years, they understand that you're probably, running blind, and that you probably don't feel like you know as much as you might know, or you might not know what you don't know. And so I think that talking to most coaches, and just saying, hey, look, I don't, necessarily feel entirely comfortable all the time. Do you mind if I bounce some questions off you? For most people, what I'll normally tell them is, because I bring this up a lot, and so I'll get that question a lot. What I like to do is, and this is something that you could do too, I like to tell them, hey, join one of my groups, ask the question in the group. You don't have to signify that you're a coach, but say, hey, I've got this question, and then ask the question as if it's you that's asking the question, and then we can address the question. And I like doing it that way. One, because you're going to be taking a lot of time to help people anyways. And if somebody's asking you, the least you could do is, if somebody's requesting of you that you do this, the least you could do is try to help as many people as possible. And the least that they could do is accept that, this is your time, and we got a lot on our plates. So if they ask in your group, people can see that you've got some knowledge on different subjects. People can see that you're helpful with other people. I found that if it's entirely within private message, it becomes overwhelming.
Because the back and forth.
Well, you get hundreds of messages.
Yeah, that's true.
Like every day, and it just becomes overwhelming. But if it becomes something that is in like a group where you can answer the question, you're essentially answering 20 people's question at the same time.
Yep.
So I think that it is important to have your own boundaries in a way, but it's also important to understand that most of the experienced guys are willing to help.
Yeah.
But if you ask somebody and they would prefer that you do it in a certain way, do it in that way. There's a reason that they might be asking you that. So when I do it, I always say, hey, can you ask in my group? That way I can address the question, and potentially slow down 15 other questions that I might get that are similar to the topic.
And you could tag people on the answer, and if you get that question again, that was actually
absolutely
one of my questions for you is like, how do you balance everything? Because you clearly have a lot going on.
I don't sleep a lot. So this isn't something that I recommend that most people do. I'm constantly thinking, and I think that you kind of see it a little bit with some neurotic people, which can be used to your advantage. So I'm constantly thinking, I'm constantly reading, I'm constantly interacting in these groups. But I think the funny thing about it is this is one of the big things that I kind of felt in my gut when I was going through that career transition. I was like, I really like doing this stuff. And so when people ask me questions, I really enjoy answering, unless people are not open to the answer. If you say, hey, I take BCAAs, I love them, what are your thoughts? And I give you my thoughts, and you're like, no, I don't like that. Well, don't ask me that. But, if you're open to at least being like, I see what you're saying, I don't agree with it because of this. And then we can talk about that. And maybe there are some instances where you have a point. I think that it's easier to do a lot of these things and to stay motivated to do these things if it's something that you really enjoy. And whether it's a good sign about me or not, I think I'd probably be interacting in these groups, whether it was my career path or whether it wasn't. Maybe not quite as much time, but it's what I like to do.
You find you get like sucked into the social media like vortex and you can't get out when you're supposed to get other work done? you time block it.
Yes, sometimes. And so what I'll do is I'll usually procrastinate for a day and then realize what I've done. Again, your coaches aren't perfect. We procrastinate just like other people procrastinate on prepping their meals or doing things like that. So what ends up happening for me is I will realize that I've screwed up one day, and I will then figure out what I need to do, and I will allot my time. I'll put in my scheduler, and then it gets done. But a lot of times, if I let things go and just try to wing it, I get sucked into social media. And I would love to have some times where, I said I do love doing what I do, and I absolutely do. But there are some times where I'd love to take off like 4 days.
Fair.
to just go and do my own thing.
Yep.
And with me living here in Hawaii, doing my own thing would be just hiking or going to the beach or camping or something like that. But I'd love to disconnect every once in a while. Now, I don't need to do that often, but I think that is telling for people in every industry and what they're doing. Set those boundaries that can help with your own mental well-being and emotional well-being. And maybe I'm not the best at doing that all the time, but this is, part of that growing experience and learning to do that correctly.
Well, the fact that you recognize that you benefit from a schedule and from time blocking is important. Like
100%.
You could easily just like keep that thought out of your brain and just keep Facebooking and get nothing done, but you're not like
I get too much anxiety. And so that's what kills me that day that I screw up, and this happens periodically. And that day that I didn't feel like I accomplished something. I've got a certain number of things on my plate. I've got to do my check-ins for my clients. I've got to do some content creation. I've got to watch my groups and keep the conversations going in my groups. And I've got to do family time and home time. And if I feel like I'm missing out on some of those, then the next day I come back and I say, okay, well, what did I do yesterday? And this works for both nutrition. It works for, planning in life. I think that looking at things, that night or the next day is a good thing because you can remember what exactly happened.
Yep.
And so I'll write things down and I'll be like, okay, I did this and this is where I screwed up. How can I prevent, doing that so I can move forward with whatever I'm doing for the next week? And then I'll adjust my schedule and then I'll get things done. So whenever I screw up, it's something that doesn't become a snowball effect that compounds. And this is where I was going with this was people can use those journals or diaries or just taking mental notes of, okay, I know that I did something wrong, or I know I wasn't as productive as I wanted to be. What can I do to reevaluate this and do better the next time? And I think that reevaluation process is invaluable in life and fitness in general.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's part of the check-in forms. Like I make sure I tell everyone like the check-in form, yes, is to hold you accountable to me and to yourself and what we're doing, but it's self-reflection. Like you take the time to really sit down and look back at the last week and like, what really did go well? What maybe do you need to work on? And that way you're more invested, you're more mentally in the process rather than just like, okay, I have workouts on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and this is my calories. Like that's not enough because once coaching is over, you're going to need to know like, what are your strong points? What is maybe holding you back from that end result that you're looking for and that sort of thing. And talking about Facebook groups, sometimes I'll get questions or I'll get an answer to a question and someone will say, oh, but I want to do this. And immediately I'll generally ask like, what is your plan for that? Because the people, we, myself included, we love to say, I want to do this. But unless you have something written down or some sort of even rough idea of how you're going to get there, I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, then it's an interest. It's not a commitment.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
so there's a difference between being interested in something and being committed to something. You might be interested in losing a certain amount of body fat, but are you committed to doing it? And I think a good thing with where coaches are going now is it's definitely more understanding than it used to be. Dietary advice is no longer broccoli and boiled chicken and brown rice. But that doesn't mean that you don't need to make concessions. I've had some people that that have come on, with me. And I remember one guy in particular, within the first 6 weeks, he lost 16 pounds, which was pretty impressive.
Nice.
Now he started, I believe, at like 250, 260, and lost about 16 pounds. And he was eating stuff like tacos and burgers and stuff like that daily. And his comment was, well, he didn't want to continue doing this if he couldn't have pizza every day. And so,
Beautiful.
and so that's one of those concessions of, sorry, man, this is not something you can have every day.
Yeah.
This is not 100% a daily food. I will support you if you want to have an off-plan meal every few weeks where you have a couple slices of pizza. That's fine. And a guy that's that big can do that. A girl that's 140 pounds may not be able to do that if you expect to continue to progress.
Yeah.
If you're okay with holding steady, good. We've got the right expectations. Let's do it. But for him, it was, and this is, again, we're doing the coaches podcast right now. So for the coaches that are new, that are looking into these things, you might feel pressured because so many coaches say, it's, you don't restrict yourself. Don't restrict yourself. It's, you got to do what you want to do, so you stop cravings. And that's kind of bullshit.
Yeah. Because
you do have to restrict yourself a little bit. And that's terrible to say. And everyone's going to be like, he's saying the wrong thing. Don't restrict. You restrict within reason. And you restrict within reason because not restricting is what got you to where you are. Which is why the whole concept of, well, I just want to intuitively eat. Well, it's not intuitive for you. So intuitively, you want to be 260 pounds.
Yeah.
So why don't we break the cycle? And that's how I like looking at it. Why don't we break the cycle? And by breaking the cycle, and especially reaffirming to these people that this might not be something that is permanent. Say that when you have pizza, you can't have 2 slices, you have to have the whole pizza. All right, no more pizza.
And no pizza.
At least for the next 4 weeks, no more pizza. Make that commitment. We have an end date. Let's do that. Mm-hmm. Then you go through. What I find is by the time you get to the end, if people because people can do a few weeks to a couple months just fine by restricting themselves, because they can say, okay, I know that this isn't forever. If you get to that end point, what I normally find is people want it less, and then we can say, okay, you've restricted for 4 weeks. Do you want to have some? And they'll either say yes, or a lot of times people say, no, I'm okay. If they say yes, we say, okay, well, let's do, 1 or 2 slices and write that down, make that commitment, have 2 slices this Sunday when you're watching football or hockey.
Nice.
And enjoy it, but only have those 2, and make that decision beforehand, because this is a decision that was made consciously by you that is not emotionally run.
Nice. Yeah.
And that way there's no guilt. And so you slowly reintroduce the foods that way. So, what I was getting at was, don't feel bad as a coach to instill some forms of moderation, which is essentially a form of restriction, because they're not necessarily the same thing when used, as long as the person that is using it understands the process. So I think that a lot of younger coaches get concerned about being like, I can't tell them that they can't have pizza. You can have pizza, but then you don't expect to lose weight or measurements, or, and if you're okay with doing that week after week, then what you're paying me for is to be your friend and just talk to you every few weeks and not actually progress, which is cool too, as long as you understand that's the purpose of our relationship.
Yeah.
So this is another one of those things that I wish I would have had the conversation with off the bat, and just started with that, because you'd feel a little bit more empowered as a coach to tell somebody, hey, look, you've had problems with this particular food item. Let's detox it. It's a terrible word. But let's.
I know what you mean, but it's a terrible word.
Let's get this out of here for a predetermined period of time that you're okay with. I mean, this is a conversation between the two of you. Come up to them and say, in my experience, 4 to 8 weeks, choose in between there. Where do you want to do it? Empower them to make that choice. I wouldn't do less than 4 weeks, because you're not really.
It's not long enough.
It's not long enough.
I can go 2 weeks without a donut. That's fine.
I know. Yeah. Even though it's your symbol, you can go 2 weeks.
I can go 2 weeks.
But We're going to test this later. But give them that autonomy. Make them part of the process, get their feedback. The one thing that I wouldn't do is, I do full reviews of my clients' nutrition. I know some people will just do macros and call it a day. I don't love that, because I think macros are great for understanding energy balance and why you gain weight or why you lose weight, but it doesn't cover health. It doesn't cover what weight you gain necessarily. I mean, if you're not eating enough protein, you're not gaining muscle mass, you're gaining fat.
Yep.
So I review pretty much everything that people eat. So what I like to do with those 4 weeks is really push the right foods, and make sure that they're eating the right healthy foods. So we start to move away from heavily processed foods as the basis of a diet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously there's room for some, and there's definitely room for more for a 260-pound man than there is for a 120-pound woman.
Yep.
But getting in that right mindset and having a little bit of autonomy as a client will strengthen your relationship better than almost anything else you can do.
I think that's what makes you such a great coach, man. The in-depth thing is huge. And I do something like that. Like I give macros and stuff, but I'll actually go into their MyFitnessPal and do like a video kind of screenshot of me going through their diary and giving them feedback with that. I found that's been very helpful. That's something I wish I was doing years ago.
That's perfect, because you're doing that coaching aspect.
Yeah.
Giving a person macros, there's nothing wrong with giving a person macros. And in fact, for some people, they say it's not sustainable for the rest of their lives. And I completely understand it. That's fine. But having a few months of doing macros, learning to have the right meal compositions, now you finally figured out what you're eating.
Exactly.
I feel like it is important, or at least it's even critical, to have some form of measurement. Now, I'm not saying that you have to weigh food, whether it's doing the precision nutrition method of doing a hand size amount, learning the right foods, and then using your hands, your thumb, your palm to make decisions, whether it's weighing. I like weighing because it's just easier for me. I mean, I'm not going to have people dump a ton of whey protein powder in their hand and try to figure it out. But so like, I want people to weigh stuff, because I feel like it's the best way to actually control what we're working with.
Absolutely.
So the way that you're doing it is similar to the way that I do it. I do a combination of I kind of have a hybrid model that I don't think I've ever seen anybody else use before, where I've got a meal plan, a skeletal structure meal plan with like multi-tiered meals, plus a macro flex option that they can use, so they can see the macros and everything like that. But it's the coaching that you're giving that's the important part. So when you're going through that MyFitnessPal, you're doing exactly what the person needs. You're saying, okay, I see this food, this is an okay, treat for you to have. Here's how I would have considered moderating it. If you're okay with the way that it is, that's good. I just want to bring this up because I want you to look at foods this way, because some days you might say, I want the full milkshake. Another day you might say, I'll just have some chocolate milk, because I've now cut out 200 calories. I'm getting the chocolate taste that I want. And this is something that's sustainable for me in my new lifestyle. But bringing those things up is exactly what you pay the coaches to do. I mean, that's what coaching is. It's enlightening people to different ways of thinking that they wouldn't have thought about before. They
need to see that. And usually it doesn't take much, but they'll come to realizations on their own of what foods they really don't need to have anymore. Like I had a conversation with a client last week, and she was like, yeah, there's this new bubble tea place. And she's like, but then I looked at the calories and it's like 300 or 400 calories every time. Plus it's like $7. And I'm like, do you think you're going to keep having these bubble teas? She's like, no. She's like, I'm not. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to ask you to completely cut them out necessarily, but like, if you want to make it your Friday thing, allot the calories for that bubble tea, I have no problem with that. If you enjoy it, to me, that's fine if we're being proactive. I always like to say like proactive is better than being reactive in terms of tracking food, because I can intuitively eat all day and go back and log it all. I will get really, really big really quickly.
Yeah.
I intuitively want to go to the bakery every time my wife sends me a picture of a new donut that's been coming out or something. So
intuitively, I'm 175 pounds. So it's not, it doesn't work out well for me either. And I'm 225, 230 right now. So it doesn't work out extremely well for me either, which is why I think that this process of measuring things in some way to give yourself an idea of what is in foods is critical.
Yeah, and I always sell it as like a skill. Like
It's 100% a skill.
Yeah, you don't have to do it forever, but if you can buckle down and jump in 2 feet for 3 months or 6 months or however long, you will take that with you after and not have to do it as much. Maybe if you want to get nitty gritty here and there, but in different phases. But yeah, it's definitely a skill building.
Well, and a thing that I think a lot of macros coaches fall into is IAFYM kind of screwed macros for people a little bit, because I remember when IAFYM was starting, it wasn't meant to be what it became. It wasn't about fitting Pop-Tarts into like every single day of your life. That's not what it was. It was a way to explain the fact that you didn't have to have boiled chicken and broccoli for every meal. It was a way to explain that you could have, you know, lean burger, you could have lean taco, you could have steak, you could have, you know, you could have chicken thighs.
Be like a normal person.
Yes, because chicken thighs come with a lot of nutrients. You know, sure, they have more fat than chicken breast does.
Yeah.
And in some people, maybe you can't fit that as a daily meal. But, you know, I think that coaches have to be careful with running macros with people and trying to fit like a bubble tea every day, because you're compromising your nutrition to fit this. And, you know, a guy that sticks out to me is I have a client who is a great guy. He really wants to do well. He's in his 60s, and his issue is he's a big guy, which is good because that gives him a lot of calories to work with. He's like 6'6", but he was, when we started, was near 300 pounds. And one of the reasons that he was because he had 3 coffees a day, but he had a whole bunch of heavy cream and creamer in each one of the things. And we added it up, and it was between 800 and 1,000 calories a day.
Holy, just as coffees.
Wow. So this is one of those situations where, you know, breaking that habit that you've had for years, I mean, decades, is a really difficult thing. And as a coach, because this is the Coach's Podcast, as a coach, you can't be afraid to cut some of those things out, or at least drastically down. So what we did was, in his plan, I gave him an option to have a couple servings of the sugar-free creamer, the Coffee Mate creamer, that he could use every day, or he could switch to black coffee. And he just switched to black and like immediately dropped 20 pounds.
There you go. Yeah.
Within,
easily. Yeah.
You know, within a month. I mean, within a month or two, I mean, you take out 1,000 calories a day. Holy crap.
That's a lot. Holy hell. I know.
And so then he got to eat a lot more chicken thighs because we could fit it. And so, you know, you find these ways to make it more sustainable, but also give them a lifestyle that a normal human would have, not chicken and broccoli.
Yeah. You're not strapped to a diet because you're trying to lose fat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and if you as a coach, if you say, yeah, you know what, we can fit this because this is what you really want, this is where you need to stand firm, because what are they going to do when they leave you? You know, they're still going to be in that mindset of, you know, I never kind of got over having this much cream or this much sugar 3 or 4 times a day in my coffees. They're going to go immediately back to that. Their time to get over that is when they're with you, having you as a coach as a parachute.
That's a good point.
You know, so there's a way that you can do this where you switch from a trainer to a coach. A trainer can give somebody macros. A coach can help them break that cycle that has caused them to be where they are.
Love that. That's awesome, man. That's why you're the man.
Well, I appreciate that.
Doc, I don't want to take up too much of your time. This has been awesome, by the way. We've ran over an hour. This is great. Now let everyone know where they can find you, because obviously I want to spread the good word.
You can look for me on my website, mauiathletics.com. That's MAUI athletics.com. We have links there to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all at Maui Athletics. It should be pretty easy. You can give me a look there.
And the Facebook group name?
The Facebook group name is Gym Memes and Tips. It's pretty easy to find. If you are easily offended, it's probably not the best group. If you have a good sense of humor or are willing to learn and have a good time, absolutely join. I'll get you in.
It's perfect for everyone listening to this podcast. I'm sure it'll be perfect fit. I don't know if we'll have any people getting triggered on this one, but that's where to find.
No, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah, it'll be okay. That's where we'll find Dr. Allan Bacon. Man, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate you, man.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, we'll talk later.
Appreciate it.
See ya.